Ladies and gentlemen, after my last video on JB retirement, there are some nasty comments that I need to address. And this video is to address to these people who see people know up. I really need to address this. So let's watch on, shall we? The title of my talk is JB retirement are for borderline Singaporeans. Okay, borderline Singaporeans. Now, some people might be asking what borderline Singaporean is. And I really would like to address this really very harsh comment because there are quite a few people who are having this kind of thinking. So I'm just going to deal with it head on. So recently in my Telegram chat, I received this comment and it was to everybody, over 30,000 over Telegram fans. Everybody can see it. So this person actually says, my 23-year-old daughter stayed overnight in JB with her friends recently in an above average JB accommodation, 500 meters away from Causeway. Possibly 5 meters, I would say Princess Cove is most likely one. She came back very disappointed. She found no reason to visit again, citing very negative vibes of JB. So this is where the important comment is. The only ones seriously considering retirement in JB will be Malaysian-born Singaporeans or borderline Singaporeans, which I was trying to figure out what borderline Singaporeans means, but he actually defined it, who never made a concrete effort to comfortably retire in Singapore. Borderline Singaporeans means people who live on the fringe financially, and these are people who never make an effort to make it enough so that you can have a comfortable retirement in Singapore. This person went on to say that, I reckon that 90% of Singaporeans would never consider retirement in Singapore. Really? That's not what the article says, that in the previous video. Let's please stop overplaying this about retiring in JB or how heavenly JB is. Personally, I would rather make multiple trips to Bali every year, and relatively, Bali is more heavenly even for retirement at a lower cost. So this thing appeared and I saw this, I was like, I need to deal with this kind of attitude, not just from this person, because this person got quite a lot of support actually. So I think it's important to address this, and I actually see more and more of this kind of comments emerging here and there, not just in my community, but in other places as well. So let's watch on. This is what my reply to him in the Telegram group is. I actually say this, incidentally, my daughter Kate, my daughter Kate Loo, is also 23 years old, just gum ho, and often go into JB with her friends for shopping and dining and do not share your daughter's sentiment. I just think that, your daughter's view does not represent the majority view, okay? And as much as you have this experience, my daughter has another experience. But I also like to address another comment as well. The only ones seriously considering retirement in JB were Malaysian-born Singaporeans or borderline Singaporeans who have never made a concrete effort to comfortably retire in Singapore. I think that this statement is quite serious. So I actually wrote back and say that your statement shows that you fail to understand the financial hardship of many Singaporeans in coping with the inflationary fire of Singapore. What you're alluding to is that if you cannot afford to retire in Singapore, it is your fault for not earning enough, not saving enough, or not investing enough, or all three. There are many hardworking and thrifty Singaporeans that simply cannot afford to retire in Singapore. In fact, 55% of Singaporeans are thinking of retiring in JB. To say that 55% of Singaporeans never made a concrete effort to comfortably retire in Singapore, I think is too much. So I say that there are many hardworking and thrifty Singaporeans that simply cannot afford to retire in Singapore. They deserve our empathy. So I'll just say this outright, unlike you, the person who finger point at them, say that you guys are washed out. I think I, Mr. Loo, would like to try to find a solution for them in JB or elsewhere. And I think a lot of people give me some affirmation. This is a timely reminder for many of us Singaporeans. If you can make it in a retirement in Singapore, good for you. It's great. If you can stay in landed property, you can stay in condo comfortably, good for you. I'm happy for you, right? But do spare a thought that there are other people who have tried life circumstances, background, whatever reason is, but find it still a struggle to retire comfortably in Singapore. You have not met them, but I've met a lot of them. And many of them are very hardworking. They may not be as blessed as you. You can say that, oh, because you didn't study enough, you didn't work hard enough, whatsoever. No, life has many reasons why some people just can't make it as well as you guys do. For you guys who are doing very well and say that Singapore is a nice place to retire, you can afford it, good for you. Do you know how many people cannot afford to retire in Singapore comfortably like you? I think you got to wake up. You have no empathy. You don't need to be so curt and direct, and hurt the feelings of many people. What are you doing to help your fellow Singaporeans? It's very easy to just say, you guys are washed out. You guys are borderline Singaporeans. I think it's important for us to help each other. Now, if you cannot help them, at least shut up. For for me, I go out and just demonstrate that there is an alternative. Not everybody needs to buy a house in Austin Heights. There's rental, there's other options as well. Just think of other options. And that's where I think the availability of options is a wonderful choice. They'll help to alleviate some of this pressure of retirement. Now, how many people are feeling the pressure of retirement? Of course, it's the people who in the lower tier of the income bracket that's feeling it. In fact, help with cost of living is top of the budget of 2024. It's a wish list for Singapore. An Asia One survey done it. And let me just say this, nearly 80% of Singaporeans feel Lawrence Wong should make cost of living his top priority when he's PM. So anyway, these articles are coming out. I don't need to tell everybody Singaporeans are generally feeling the pressure of inflation. Even I don't stay in Singapore that much, and I don't think I'm in the income bracket that I should feel very painfully, but I still feel some of the pressures that most people do. I'm shocked at the price of hawker centers right now. I'm shocked at the price of NTUC Fair Price stuff or Sheng Siong. I think it's gone up a lot. So if I'm feeling it, let alone many people, right? We should empathize with people who are looking for alternatives for their retirement in elsewhere. And there's nothing wrong with it. Just a few weeks ago, we saw articles in Straits Times that came out and say that close to half of Singaporeans cannot achieve financial freedom. And that's, I think, a real issue, right? And many people feel that they have to work until they die. I think this is the frank truth that many people feel that they're struggling. And there are surveys that right now done by Answer.sg, 55% of respondents say that they will move to JB to avoid the cost of living. It's a real issue. And I don't think there's anything wrong to seek an alternative in JB as a retirement alternative. For people who do so, we should not view them negatively as borderline Singaporeans that's never made an effort. Come on, man. Go slap yourself if you think that way. I'm not encouraging everybody to flock over to JB. There are negatives about JB living, and I've highlighted this in my previous video. But you do have an alternative of retiring comfortably in JB. So according to a cost of living database called Numbeo, the cost of living in JB, if one exclude rent, is about 66% lower in Singapore. This is ballpark about right. If you include rent, JB is even cheaper. It's about 75% lower. There are many statistics here and there. One plate of char kway teow in Singapore and JB is a world of different prices. Cost of dental treatment is different. Cost of this is different. The cost of that is different. And Numbeo says that a person will need about 3,000 a month Singapore dollars in JB for a standard of living that costs $12,000 in Singapore. That's very interesting. To achieve a standard of living in Singapore that a 12,000 cost of living that bring you, it only requires 3,000 Singapore dollars for you to achieve the same type of living in JB. Four times, right? So I think it's very nice to have this option. Before we start finger point people and, if you retire in JB, you're borderline Singaporean that's never made an effort. I would just say that for some, retirement in JB might be the only option for a wonderful retirement. Most of us in Singapore should be able to afford a subsistent point of retirement. Subsistent, that means barely enough or just enough. You got to cut down your expenses here and there. But the same amount that you spend here, when you go to JB, it turned out to be a wonderful retirement. For people who are taking this option, don't feel shy. There's no shame. Mr. Loo is taking this option as well. I publicly say it. There is no shy. And for those people who finger point at these people, look down on these people, come on, guys. You have to cut people some slack in choosing some options of living, right? And by the way, there are some like me, I would say many as well, who choose to stay in JB or maybe overseas as a more wonderful retirement option, not because we cannot afford a Singapore retirement, but we choose to have something different, something more exciting, have some strategy. Met a lot of these people already. If you don't like overseas retirement, stay in Singapore. It's a lovely choice too. Nothing wrong. Costs a lot more. But if you can afford it, good for you. But for you who can afford to retire in Singapore, okay, don't you dare look down on those who choose to retire overseas. And I think before you start labeling these fellow Singaporeans who retire in JB as borderline Singaporean who did not make an effort, I think that you should cut yourself some self-reflection. Now, I'm aware that there is a lot of people who don't agree for JB retirement because of many reasons, and there are also people who agree. I know we are all aware of this kind of chatter. So people who say no to JB, I know, right? We complain that there's frequent floods. I've never encountered one of them. there's inconvenient public transport because public transport services are not so good in Malaysia. That is true. I would say Grab is pretty good there. JB has no town planners and things like that. Possible. Never had an issue with that. Some people have because they're used to Singapore life. In big countries, getting one place to another is inconvenient, time consuming if they're doing MRT. In Malaysia, JB, most people would drive or take a Grab, right? It's best to retire in your own country. You live most of your life in Singapore and nothing beats the familiarity, a sense of belonging. On this note, I think it's important for Singaporeans to have a global mindset, ability to reside globally as well, right? I think more and more Singaporeans are just too comfortable to move out of Singapore. I don't think that's very good for sense of adventure. Yes, JB is not as secure as Singapore. On that note, I think most countries are not as secure as Singapore. And I think you benchmark Singapore, I think that is quite true, right? And there are some people who say, I went to JB a few times. I don't agree that the food is better in Singapore, just cheaper. The best food in Malaysia and KL, Penang, certainly not JB. I'll just say this, you haven't gone to enough places. You went to a few times not knowing where to hunt for and you concluded that it's not better. Come on, guys. Food is definitely tastier in Malaysia, but Malaysian food tends to be saltier and more unhealthy. That is not exactly wrong, okay? Good food are normally not healthy and it's difficult to find healthy options like in Singapore. It's probably true, okay? Cook yourself if you want or you want to be healthy. I feel very unsafe even in broad daylight. That's probably true and you take it relative to Singapore, yes. My take is this, that most of us need to learn how to adapt overseas. I think a lot of people think that healthcare is much better in Singapore than in Malaysia, and that is true. I would just say this, right? Straddle if you want to have the best of both worlds, right? On this concept of straddling, I think there are a lot of people who say that when you're young and you're still fit, straddling is okay. But when you're too old, straddling may not be good because it's difficult for you to drive and things like that. I agree. If I'm in my 80s and 90s, probably that is true as well. Then you got to cut down on some of this straddling, right? Options are there for you to pick, depending of your condition of your health. Someone said that, Mr. Loo, if I were you, I'll just get a big condo in Singapore and let my children come and visit me more often. If my condo compound is fun, have lots of space to run around, right? I do have space to run around in my HDB playground and park downstairs. I think it's great as well. But Malaysia gives more different options, right? Let people have more excitement, right? My children grew up visiting Malaysia a lot because we work there quite a bit when they're young, and they grew up very different. So much about people who say no to JB. There's a lot of people who say yes to JB. In fact, these people are a lot more, because every big holidays there are millions of people to go to Malaysia for holiday. And I think there are people who say that the economic consideration favors JB tremendously. JB is a big state in Malaysia, not too congested, more green, less polluted, more places to go, cost of living is low, more relaxing, flexible rules and things like that. In Singapore, it's like a bird cage. Everything is limited, less freedom, boring, hard to compare with JB, blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, both have its pros and cons. And for those people who are interested, the RTS thing is coming up. Easier for us to travel to and fro. And it's almost, I would say, 85-90% done in terms of the link. In conclusion, I just want to say this. If you choose to retire in Singapore and can afford it, good for you. I'm happy for you. If you choose to retire in JB, even though you can afford retire in Singapore, good for you as well, because you would like to choose a more different, exciting options. If you straddle like me, good for you as well. But if you have to retire in JB so that you have a more comfortable retirement, it is okay. There's no shame about it. But I think for us to point fingers and call people as borderline Singaporeans, I think that's crossing the line. I think it's more important that we help fellow Singaporeans in helping them to invest well, educate them well. And if all these measures, some people have missed the window because they're already past a certain age or just didn't turn out with the right finances, there is always this option of stretching a dollar if you retire in JB or even other places. But I prefer JB because it's nearer and there's no shame to it. You can have wonderful living as well. So it's basically a different strokes for different folks, and we respect each other for our choices in life. Okay, so thank you for watching, and I would like to see your comments, and I'll see you in a day or two. Bye bye.